The New York Rangers acquire Reilly Smith from the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for a second-round pick in 2027, as well as a fifth-round pick in 2025. We talk about why it's a decent move, but not an all-time great move by the Rangers.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1103 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So this is basically going to be the Reilly Smith show here today. The Rangers, of course, striking a trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins a little bit earlier today to bring in Reilly Smith, who is in the last year of his contract. Of course, I'm also very well aware, as I'm sure many of you are as well, of the entire saga that's unfolding with Jacob Trouba. I mean, this just feels like the most Ranger thing ever. And the Jacob Trouba situation, there's still facts coming out about it now. It's at night on Monday night here. And, you know, that deserves its own episode. And it's going to get its own episode tomorrow, hopefully in the morning or the afternoon at the earliest. That whole situation is ridiculous. The only thing I'll say about it now, because I feel like I need to really let everything marinate and just kind of collect my thoughts on this whole ridiculous situation, as well as, you know, find out what other facts are going to drop here. Because right when you think it can't get any more convoluted or weird, it does. And right now, the latest is that part of the reason why Jacob Trouba is not being traded is because his wife has to complete her residency in New York. I can't believe I just said that sentence, but it appears to be a fact. We'll see again. A lot of more layers probably on the way to be unveiled throughout this entire story here. I feel like there's a lot of things that we probably don't know about yet. And like I said, we'll discuss it in the next episode. But for right now, some mostly good news for the Rangers. They trade for Reilly Smith, and he wasn't at the very top of my list as far as UFA targets or trade targets, but he is a good player and somebody that can, you know, add a little bit more scoring punch to the Rangers. For the full details of the trade, again, the Rangers get Reilly Smith. The Penguins get a second-round pick in 2027 and also a fifth-round pick in 2025. The fifth-round pick in 2025 will be the worst of the two picks that the Rangers have in that round. They have their own pick, and they have the Minnesota Wild's pick. The Wild's pick, that was the selection that the Rangers acquired in exchange for Ryan Reaves when they sent Ryan Reaves to Minnesota, not this past season, but the one before that. And again, Reilly Smith does have only 1 year left on his deal. He will be a UFA after that. And the Penguins are also going to retain 25% of his $5 million cap hit. So that leaves with the Rangers with a $3.75 million cap hit for Reilly Smith this season. And as far as like Smith's history, 33 years old, 13 years in the league, third-round pick by the Stars in 2009, drafted number 69 overall, bounced around quite a bit, 2 years with the Stars, 2 with the Bruins, 2 with the Panthers, 6 with the Knights. Of course, he won the Stanley Cup there in 2023. And then this last season with the Penguins, 840 regular season games, 213 goals, 300 assists, 513 points, plus 127, averages 16 minutes, 54 seconds of ice time per night, 322 block shots, 674 hits, 478 takeaways against 438 giveaways. Bit of a down season for him, at least from a scoring perspective with the Penguins this past year, 76 games, 13 goals, 27 assists, and he was a +3. I will say, mixed feelings on this trade, and we're going to weigh out all the pros and cons here as we go forward in today's episode. But one thing that I love, this dude gets the job done when it comes to playoff hockey. His scoring rate increases quite a bit. Regular season, as I mentioned, 513 points in 840 games. That rounds out to about 0.61 points per game. And then in the playoffs, 26 goals and 53 assists for a total of 79 points in 106 playoff games. And that rounds out to 0.75 points per game. So his scoring goes up a tick in the playoffs. And during Vegas's run to the Stanley Cup, Smith had 4 goals, 10 assists in the 22 games. Also had a big showing in Vegas's second most recent trip to the Cup final. back in 2017, 2018 when they lost to the Caps. But during that run, Smith had 5 goals and 17 assists for 22 points in 20 games. So the guy really brings it when it comes to playoff hockey, and I love that about him. I also like the fact that Reilly Smith does only have 1 year left on his deal. I pitched the idea several times on here with a number of different free agents, the idea of the Rangers going out and signing somebody in free agency or doing this, potentially trading. I preferred free agency because you don't have to give anything up. But you go out and you get somebody for just 1 year because, as we know, next offseason is going to be rough. You have to figure out a way to get Lafreniere signed, Igor signed, Miller signed. Is Trouba still going to be here? We don't know. We have no idea. Might depend on his wife's, schedule. I don't know. I don't want to get into it too much. Like I said, I do want to collect my thoughts on that entire situation. But the bottom line, the Rangers are going to be up against it a little bit as far as the salary cap is concerned next season. By bringing in Reilly Smith, who is only on a 1 year deal, you figure it's probably one and done. This will be his only season with the Rangers because they're going to need that money to re-sign some of their own in-house guys next offseason. But, for the time being, Chris Drury had this to say about Reilly Smith. It's a player we've been looking at and talking about for a while. We were talking to a lot of different agents. We just felt this was the best move we could make. Brings a lot of versatility to our lineup, has a winning pedigree, having won in Vegas, a proven playoff performer, and I think just fits in nicely with our entire group. We just were talking to a lot of different agents and a lot of balls in the air throughout the day and just felt this was the best move we can make. So, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot there as far as Drury's comments, but there's nothing inherently wrong with Reilly Smith. You bring him in as somebody that's a depth signing, but I do have some concerns about this move. I just feel like there were better players available. There were also free agents available that signed comparable deals that Reilly Smith signed, a couple of 1 year deals out there. And of course, those were all players that you could just sign in free agency. You wouldn't have to give a 2nd round pick and a 5th round pick to one of your arch rivals in the draft, in the coming years here. So, yeah, for that reason, Smith just didn't really make a lot of sense to me, and he doesn't really bring the physicality and the grit, I think, that maybe a lot of Ranger fans were hoping for as far as players that they could target on the first day of free agency here. And just about everybody's off the board, so it's kind of slim pickings as far as the UFAs that are still out there. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I do want to, in just a second, shift our attention to, again, the pros and cons and why I have some concerns, some reservations about Reilly Smith. He's not a bad player, and certainly I think he can do some things to help the Rangers at least a little bit, but couple of concerns. And like I said, I will get to those in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats of the game, ahead of the game or the event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're going to keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers, and just want to thank the everydayers as always. Thank you guys for making this part of your daily routine and getting the latest news on the New York Rangers. And for everybody going forward, like I said, the next episode going to focus probably exclusively on the Jacob Trouba saga and all the latest things that are happening there, because it feels like we're only in about chapter 3 of a 10-chapter book here. So we'll see how the whole thing unfolds. But we're going to be doing that tomorrow, talking about all the latest on Jacob Trouba and what's happening there. Of course, some more free agency coverage as it pertains to the Rangers, more on the Ranger draft class, et cetera, et cetera. Might also line up some crossovers with the other Locked On hosts, talk about players that departed the Rangers in free agency and also those that came in on Monday. I mean, really, it's just Reilly Smith and Sam Carrick, but, I guess it's better than nothing. So, again, Reilly Smith, want to keep everything rolling by talking some more about him. Again, I don't mind him. Not a bad player at all. Reasonably productive player with, the 513 points in 840 games. And I do think the Rangers probably see this as something of a buy low opportunity when it comes to Reilly Smith, because once again, he is coming off of a slightly down season with Pittsburgh. Just didn't seem to click for him with the Penguins the way that it did with the Knights. And, obviously he was with the Knights for 6 seasons before he was traded away. We know the Rangers, they must like him. There must be something there that they like, because this is not the first time Reilly Smith has been connected to the Rangers. Vegas has their cap issues and their cap circumvention every single season. And it always feels like Reilly Smith for years was always kind of on the trade block for them because, well, we're up against the cap and we can't go over the cap and somebody might have to be traded. And it eventually happened. He was on his way to Pittsburgh last season, but now he's with the Rangers. And I don't know. There is a buy low chance here. I do see that, but I also feel like the Rangers should be kind of wary of the fact that the Pittsburgh Penguins, of all teams, their arch rivals, they were willing to trade this guy, Reilly Smith, to their arch rival, New York Rangers. So that tells me the Penguins must not think super highly of Reilly Smith. It also means that they're not really afraid of him in any, major way. And yeah, I understand, they got a second round draft pick in exchange for Smith. So maybe that price, that return was just so good for them that they felt like they had to do it. But you got to remember that second round pick, that doesn't happen until 2027. So that's 3 years from now. And then whichever player they draft there, he's not going to start in the NHL. No second round picks ever do. You got to figure it's at least a year or two at the minimum before that player, makes his NHL debut. So the Penguins just basically gave us Reilly Smith for the opportunity to have, a second round draft pick make his NHL debut 5 years from now. That's a little bit of a red flag to me that they were that willing to just hand him over to the New York Rangers. And I know, the Rangers and Penguins, they did a deal at the deadline this past season rather as well. The trade deadline, Rangers pick up Chad Ruhwedel in exchange for a 4th round pick, but that's small potatoes. I mean, that's a very minor trade. No disrespect to Chad Ruhwedel, but it's the truth. The Rangers were bringing a depth defenseman that was not going to play if everybody was healthy, and it was for a 4th round pick, not a 2nd and a 5th round pick. So I understand they did that, but to me, this is a bigger trade and a little bit more of a red flag. The other thing too, he's not the biggest or the most physical player in the world. 6'1", 185 pounds. I mean, not what I would call small, but certainly not a giant out there either. Averages less than 1 hit per game for his NHL career. Again, none of this, is relatively small size compared to other NHL giants that are out there. That has not worked against him come playoff time, nor has the fact that he's not necessarily the most physical player in the world come playoff time. So, I mean, that does need to be stated, and we want guys that can perform in the playoffs, and Reilly Smith has been that guy throughout his career. But something that I mentioned when we did our very short video on Reilly Smith earlier today, I just did like a 2 or 3 minute video where I had some quick thoughts on Reilly Smith and on this trade. Reilly Smith to me right now feels like the latest in a long line of 3rd line caliber wingers that the Rangers are trying to make into a top line winger. And it's probably semantics. You could say that, well, it's more like a 2nd line winger because at this point, Panarin and Trocheck and Lafreniere, that's your top line. That's true and everything. But still, you're talking about somebody that you want to play with your 2nd and 3rd highest paid forwards in Mika and Kreider, and somebody that wants to jumpstart that line, and somebody that you want to be able to complement those guys very well, and somebody that's going to be in your top 6. I just don't know that Reilly Smith is really that guy. There's nothing that I feel like is really like overly impressive about him. Again, he does make the team better. The Rangers with Reilly Smith are a better team than the Rangers without Reilly Smith. And when you look at some of the UFAs that are walking or are very likely to walk, Wenberg already signed with another team. Jack Roslovic is probably going to sign with some other team. Reilly Smith's better than them. I feel like I can go ahead and say that. Certainly he's better from an offensive perspective and probably has a better overall well-rounded game as well. So there's that to consider. So they are a better team with Smith, but I just don't know that he was like the ideal target for this team on this day. I also have to ask the question, and I mentioned this on Twitter earlier today. When you have players out there as unrestricted free agents, I'm not even talking about like the big fish, because I know a lot of us got excited. We wanted, Toffoli, or we wanted Bertuzzi, or we wanted Kane, or Stamkos or Marchessault. One of the really big free agent names. Rangers didn't get any of them. At least with that, like, top tier of free agent, you could make the case that, well, all those teams overpaid and it's too many years, and those guys are all in their 30s and they're going to be in their mid to late 30s when the contract runs up. You can at least make the case for guys like that. But what about like this second tier of free agents? Guys like Anthony Mantha, guys like Jason Zucker, guys like Jeff Skinner, none of whom are perfect, none of whom are like superstars by any stretch, but I think like any of them probably would have been an overall better fit for the Rangers in terms of what they need. The first two especially, Mantha and Zucker, maybe not Skinner quite as much, but those two are more physical players than Reilly Smith. And the big kicker here is you don't have to give up a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick to bring them in. You could just sign them in free agency. You don't have to give the Penguins a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick. Now, again, I'm willing to give Reilly Smith a chance. I just mentioned I do think it's a better team, an incrementally better team with Reilly Smith here, but I can't sit here and act like this is my favorite Ranger trade of all time or my favorite Ranger acquisition of all time. Again, Mantha, you're talking about somebody, he's a giant, 6'3", 234 pounds. He signed a 1-year deal for just $3.5 million with the Flames. The Rangers couldn't have done that. Reilly Smith, even with the cap, even with the Penguins retaining some salary, Reilly Smith has a bigger cap hit this year than Anthony Mantha. I would have preferred Mantha. Mantha gives you a little bit less scoring than Smith, but again, I think a little bit better overall game when you factor in every aspect of hockey. And, Jason Zucker, not very big. He's 5'11", 192 pounds, so smaller than Mantha, obviously. But again, this is somebody that signed for just 1 year and $5 million with Buffalo and does play some gritty hockey despite not being the biggest guy out there. Yeah, I would have taken him too at that price. You can go to $5 million for Jason Zucker and probably still stay under the cap. And again, a lot of this depends on what's going to happen with Trouba. Is Kakko going to get traded? Is Lindgren going to get traded? We don't know the answer to any of these questions. And by the way, if this whole thing with Jacob Trouba leads to Lindgren being traded, I shouldn't be near a microphone if that happens. So I gotta really watch what I say there. But yeah, that's kind of where things stand. Like I said, Smith, not a bad pickup. Just feel like there were better options and guys that have a skill set that fits what the Rangers need a little bit more than Reilly Smith does. But I would love to be wrong about this. Again, not a bad signing. I'm not going to kill the Rangers for it. I just think there were better options, and they probably should have pursued other guys. But hey, maybe Reilly Smith is a perfect fit, gels seamlessly with Mika and Kreider next year, has an excellent season, and helps the Rangers in a major way. That's certainly at least possible. So we'll see how it goes. And we're going to shift our attention in just a second. I want to talk about, I already did it briefly here, but some other options that either were available or in some cases still are available, either guys that could be had in free agency or on the trade market. We will talk about some of those players in just a second. All right, let's go ahead, keep everything rolling on Locked On New York Rangers, this late night edition of Locked On New York Rangers. So is there anybody left? Is there anybody left as a free agent who's out there that could make some sense for the Rangers? I believe it's at least possible. And again, a lot of this is contingent on what the Rangers do with Trouba, Lindgren, Kakko, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know the drill at this point. But these are guys that are at least conceivable. Maybe the Rangers have to clear some cap space to make this happen. Maybe Trouba does indeed eventually get moved in one way or another, and that can open up some cap space. But some other options that are out there, none of these guys are perfect. None of these guys are infallible. But when it comes to free agency at this point, it's getting to be slim pickings. So the one name that I'm going to toss out there, and certainly I'm not the first Ranger fan to suggest this, Vladimir Tarasenko. Was not my top choice coming into unrestricted free agency. Certainly not a perfect signing for the Rangers at this point. But again, the Rangers swung and missed, or not necessarily swung and missed, but the bottom line, none of the following players are going to be coming to the Rangers after everything that went on today. They didn't get Kane, Stamkos, Gensel, Bertuzzi, Toffoli, Marchessault, Chandler Stevenson even signed. A lot of other big names as well not going to be coming to the New York Rangers. So when you look at the UFAs that are out there remaining, I become a little bit more open to a Tarasenko reunion. But again, a lot of it will hinge on other things that the Rangers do if they can afford him. Maybe Tarasenko signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Senators this past year. Would the Rangers have enough money for that? Would Tarasenko be open to signing another 1-year contract? It's at least possible. We'll see how it goes. If Kakko ends up getting traded, which could still happen, if he ends up getting traded, I think that opens a door to Tarasenko coming back a little bit because it's a right wing spot that needs to be filled. And on top of that, $2.4 million will come off the books for the Rangers, assuming they trade Kakko, for a draft pick. So that could go toward the budget to signing somebody like Tarasenko. Now, Tarasenko is slowing down a little bit. I believe he's now 32 years old. Going to turn 33 in season, if I'm not mistaken. But he did have another productive season between the Senators and the Panthers. 76 games, 23 goals, 32 assists, and a plus 13 for Vladimir Tarasenko. So somebody that can still be a productive offensive player. And you can make the argument that he would be the best right winger. I mean, he was already here once, but the best right winger that the Rangers have had to put with Mika and Kreider, since Pavel Buchnevich was here. And if they do get Tarasenko, I would strongly prefer it to be a one-year deal for the reasons that we've already covered. We don't want any big, bloated UFA contracts overlapping with next season when the Rangers have to get deals done with Lafreniere, Igor, possibly K'Andre Miller as well. I had a couple other names written down here, but right before I hit record, it was, brought to my attention one way or another that these guys have signed with new teams. A name that I wrote down was Jeff Skinner. 1 year, $3 million with Edmonton. Not a perfect player, not a very physical player. Somebody with literally no playoff experience. He has never played in a playoff game. But he was bought out by the Sabres. And now getting just $3 million for 1 year with Edmonton, I think I would have probably taken Skinner over Reilly Smith, just like the way that he can shoot and, good player, not a perfect player, but somebody that I think could have made some sense for the Rangers. I also wrote down another name here, but he now is signed with the Oilers. He re-signs with them at 2 years, $3 million per season. That's Adam Henrique. The reason I wrote him down, to begin with, he's a decent player, and it does seem to step up when it comes to playoffs. But the biggest reason was I don't think the Rangers have really done much of anything to address their need at center because, okay, you've got Mika Zibanejad on the top line or Trocheck on the second line or, semantics again. You could flip-flop the two of them, which is really the top line, which is really the second line. Bottom line, those are your two top line centers, Mika and Trocheck. Great. After that, third line, I guess right now we can tentatively pencil in Filip Chytil. But after that, Sam Carrick will center the fourth line, and that's fine. But Filip Chytil, his future is questionable at best. We have no idea what the future is going to hold for Filip Chytil. So if there's a situation next season where the Rangers have to go without Filip Chytil for any long amount of time or even a short amount of time, and he missed basically the entire regular season this past year. I think he only got 10 games in the regular season. So if they have to go without Filip Chytil, who centers the third line? They don't have anybody right now. They don't have anybody that can do it. There's nobody there. There's no prospect that plays center. I don't know what the solution would be. And if Filip Chytil misses time, and then imagine something happens to either Mika Zibanejad or Vincent Trocheck, now you're really up Bleep Creek because you're looking at a situation where Sam Carrick is going to be centering the second line. Unless there's somebody that I'm just forgetting about. Barclay Goodrow's gone. Alex Wenberg is gone. Where are the centers? They don't have any centers. They don't have anybody to put there. Can Reilly Smith play center? I've only ever seen him listed as a left winger and a right winger. Do you try Kakko at center? People have kind of tossed out that idea every so often. When it comes to Kakko, it's not an ideal solution. I don't know what they would do. I really don't. Will Cooley, he's only ever been a winger. Yeah, they need a center. This team needs to sign a center in free agency or trade for one or do something to make it happen because there is not nearly enough depth at the center position right now when it comes to the Rangers. Another name that's still out there as far as a free agent, Daniel Sprong. Not as big of a name as some other guys that are out there or were out there, but not a bad choice. 159 points in 344 games with the Penguins, Ducks, Caps, Kraken, and Wings. He is still only 27 years old, so he's got youth on his side. Would not cost an arm and a leg, you wouldn't think. Maybe $2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million a season, somewhere in that ballpark for presumably 1 year. That's another thing, too. I think it would be at least possible to get him on 1 year, although it's hard to say. Somebody might go multi-years and price the Rangers out of the Sprong sweepstakes if they go down that road. But yeah, the last two seasons combined, Sprong has played in 142 games, has 39 goals, 50 assists. So 89 points in 142 games. He's played some of his best hockey in recent seasons. One of the few guys left out there as a free agent that I think has a little bit of, sneaky upside is Daniel Sprong. Again, he's not a perfect player, not the biggest guy either, 6 feet tall, 195 pounds. But again, I do kind of like him. If the Rangers were going to sign one more free agent who's still out there, Sprong might be my pick just because I feel like with him, again, there's a little bit more upside than probably any of the other guys that are still out there. Obviously, like Jack Roslovic is still out there. I don't think too many people are clamoring for a Ranger reunion with him. There's some other names too. But I think Sprong might be the way to go if they bring in anybody else. And he seems to mostly play right wing with a little bit of left wing in there as well. As far as trade options, a couple people have tossed out Frank Vatrano. This is going to keep happening until Frank Vatrano becomes a free agent. And then we'll all talk about the Rangers bring him back. And then when that doesn't happen, he'll sign somewhere else. And we'll talk about trading for him again. You guys know the drill. Yeah, look, I really like Frank Vatrano when he was here. Absolute sniper. Obviously meshed very well with Mika and Kreider. Extremely fast. The Rangers could use, I think, maybe one more burner on their roster, but he's coming off the best season of his career, and I think he would cost a lot to bring in. Doesn't mean that it can't possibly happen, but we've seen Drury seemingly at the trade deadline be hesitant to part with some of his prospects. Didn't make the splashy move with the trade deadline that a lot of us thought that he might. Didn't happen. Don't know that it would happen now. Another name that's been kind of kicked around out there, Nikolai Ehlers of the Jets. He's got $6 million and 1 year left on his contract. He's only 28 years old, can play either wing. We have seen the Rangers and Jets do some deals in the past. Obviously Jacob Trouba and Andrew Kopp a couple of years ago. So it's possible. Ehlers is not a very big guy, 6 feet tall, 172 pounds, not a physical player. But if you want to add some more scoring and do it via the trade route, 61 points in 82 games last year. And he spent all 9 years of his career with the Jets. So yeah, all these players that I just mentioned, none of them are perfect. But again, you got to remember, it's slim pickings at this point. The Rangers chose not to pursue some of the bigger names and even really didn't do a whole lot when it came to pursuing the secondary names as far as free agents are concerned. So that's where we're at right now. A couple of other little tidbits here as far as players that we can now officially call former New York Rangers. Erik Gustafsson, he signs a 2-year deal for $2 million per season with Detroit. It's funny. I think that's the exact contract. I didn't say Detroit, but that was the exact length and dollar amount that I thought Erik Gustafsson would get as a free agent. He, did enough good things for the Rangers where he could get himself a multi-year deal and, get an increase on the $800K that he was making or $825K, whatever it was with the Rangers this past season. I think it's a good spot for him. It's a young team, an exciting team with a lot of skill. I could see him meshing pretty well there. The other kind of subplot here is that the door seems to now be wide open for Zach Jones to finally carve out, a legitimate spot for himself in the Ranger lineup. Right now, with Gustafsson being gone, I think Zach Jones now steps in as the third pair left defenseman. And I feel like, if the Rangers don't do anything significant between now and opening night, if they don't bring in any other defensemen, you're going to see Zach Jones out there on opening night. And I think the Rangers are finally going to give him some rope, see what he can do. We'll see how it goes. But I think Zach Jones has earned that opportunity, and I'm happy that he's going to get the chance to get that opportunity, it would seem, as soon as next season. Alex Wenberg. So he signs with the Sharks, 2 years at $5 million per season. That surprised me a lot. Now, you can see why. The Sharks, they're a team that they have to get to the cap floor. Forget about the cap ceiling. They have to get to the cap floor, so they've got money to burn, and Alex Wenberg clearly took advantage of that, and good for him for doing that. So he joins the Sharks, as does Barclay Goodrow, a couple of former New York Rangers now as members of the San Jose Sharks. So that's where things kind of stand on the free agent front, and I figure we can pretty much call it there. Like I said, I'm going to be talking quite a bit about Jacob Trouba in our next episode. That's going to be the whole episode, in fact. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.